Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. Humanity had always believed that the stars were the final frontier, a distant, unreachable promise. But when the aliens came, they shattered that illusion, just not in the way anyone had expected. It started with a deafening silence in the sky. For weeks, the Earth's skies were clear, peaceful, almost unnervingly so. The few who still paid attention to space news were beginning to believe that humanity might be left alone. Earth had been quiet for too long in the galactic grand scheme of things, and many had hoped it would stay that way. That was until the signal arrived. A broadcast not unlike a blip from a radio station, alien in origin, but unmistakable in its purpose. The message wasn't a friendly greeting. It wasn't a challenge either. It was simply a declaration of intent. A single command, repeated for emphasis. Surrender. The Zerkith, a race that had conquered dozens of systems across the galaxy, had arrived on Earth's doorstep. Their method was simple. Destroy all resistance, claim the planet, and continue their expansion. It was a strategy they had used successfully for centuries, one that didn't involve complex diplomacy or subtle threats. They had their fleet, an armada of ships the size of entire cities, brimming with technologically advanced weapons. To them, humanity was a mere inconvenience, a primitive species unworthy of their attention. The United Nations quickly responded to the message, calling an emergency meeting. Leaders from every country gathered in one place, their minds spinning in confusion. The Zerkith didn't negotiate. They didn't converse. They conquered. The thought of battling such a force was daunting. Earth's military might, though capable, was nothing compared to the alien might descending upon them. Then came a voice that would come to be known across the world. Commander David Reyes, a man with a reputation for his calm under pressure, stood at the front of the emergency gathering. Reyes had been trained for moments like these, but nothing in his military career had prepared him for the scale of this confrontation. Still, he refused to allow panic to take hold. The world needed hope, and Reyes was determined to provide it. "Do we have a plan?" a diplomat asked, his voice trembling. The room was filled with murmurs, all eyes turning toward Reyes. He had seen countless wars, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle for a single country, or even for the survival of Earth. It was a fight for humanity's future. "We will fight," Reyes said, his voice unwavering. "But we will do more than fight. We will show them something they've never encountered before." The words were simple but carried weight, reverberating through the room. The human spirit was a force not easily understood by the rest of the galaxy. Humanity had fought through their own dark ages, revolutions, and extinction-level events. They had survived the trials of their own making. The Zerkith, with their overwhelming technology, were about to learn that the human resolve was something that could not be easily crushed. The next few hours were filled with frantic coordination. The military leaders, engineers, and scientists worked around the clock to prepare the defense. The Zerkith were expected to arrive within days, their ships already visible at the edge of the solar system. Earth had no time to waste. In orbit, the first wave of human ships was deployed. The newly constructed fleet, though lacking the scale of the Zerkith armada, was designed for flexibility and cunning, qualities that the Zerkith had never considered in their strategy. It was clear from the moment the battle began that humanity's military, while far from the most advanced, had one distinct advantage: ingenuity. The first engagement was brief. The Zerkith, expecting an easy conquest, deployed their weapons without hesitation. Their ships fired beams of energy that could obliterate entire cities in a single shot. Humanity's fleet, however, was designed for evasion and quick strikes. They were smaller, faster, and more agile than anything the Zerkith had encountered before. But despite their speed and cunning, humanity's forces were outmatched in sheer firepower. The Zerkith warships unleashed destruction wherever they went, and many of humanity's ships were disabled or destroyed in the first few minutes of combat. Reyes watched the chaos unfold on his command screen, his heart heavy with the realization that Earth's survival was on the line. Yet, as the battle raged, a strange sense of determination rose within him. The Zerkith hadn't expected humanity to fight back, let alone with such tenacity. Commander Reyes issued a directive to his fleet: no retreat, no surrender. Then, in the midst of the battle, something unexpected occurred. A single voice echoed across the comms channels, cutting through the static of combat. It was Reyes's voice, but it wasn't a command, nor a plea. It was something much bolder. "Is that all?" he asked, his tone filled with a surprising calmness. The question wasn't directed to anyone in particular. It was an unspoken challenge to the Zerkith, to their arrogance, to their belief that humanity was nothing more than an insect to be squashed. Reyes's words echoed in the minds of every human soldier, reverberating through their hearts. It wasn't a question of survival, it was a question of pride. The Zerkith paused. For a brief moment, it seemed as though time had frozen. And in that silence, Reyes's words became the spark that ignited humanity's will to fight. The Zerkith had expected humanity to crumble before their might. They had seen it countless times across the galaxy, primitive species attempting to resist, only to be crushed beneath the weight of superior technology. But there was something different about Earth's response. Commander Reyes's simple question, "Is that all?" rang through the battlefield like a clarion call. It was a challenge not just to the invaders but to humanity itself. It was a question of survival, yes, but more importantly, it was a question of identity. Across Earth, the people felt it. The moment Reyes spoke those words, a tide of defiance swept across the planet. The governments, the military, and ordinary citizens alike understood that this was not a time for fear. It was a time for action. The world's industries, already working at full capacity to support the war effort, now entered overdrive. Soldiers, engineers, and civilians alike rallied to the cause, inspired by the bravery and audacity of a single voice. The human spirit, long thought to be a fragile thing, was revealed in that moment to be something far stronger than the Zerkith had ever accounted for. Back in space, the battle raged on. The Zerkith ships were far larger and more powerful, their weapons capable of annihilating entire fleets. Yet, humanity's forces fought with a ferocity that left the aliens puzzled. The smaller, more maneuverable human ships darted through the debris of their fallen comrades, striking with pinpoint accuracy before retreating into the shadows of space. It was guerrilla warfare on an unprecedented scale. Human pilots, trained for years in the art of evasion and surprise, used the very limitations of their ships to their advantage. The Zerkith could not adapt fast enough. But it wasn't just the military that was fighting back. A strange kind of unity had emerged on Earth, one that transcended borders and differences. Across the globe, people in every corner of the world joined in the effort, offering whatever they could: knowledge, resources, manpower. The Zerkith had never encountered such coordination among a species that, on the surface, appeared so divided. The Earth's collective response was something far more than a defense. It was a declaration. Humanity was not afraid. Back on Earth, Commander Reyes's words spread quickly, inspiring millions. But not all were as confident. In the hushed corridors of the United Nations Emergency Headquarters, diplomats and military leaders were beginning to feel the weight of the decision they had made. The aliens had brought with them a show of force that left even the most seasoned generals questioning humanity's chances. The scale of the Zerkith armada was staggering: thousands of ships, each one a juggernaut of destruction, each one capable of turning entire cities to ash. "We cannot win this," one of the generals said quietly, looking at the holographic displays of the battlefield. His fingers traced over the glowing images of ships disintegrating under the Zerkith's bombardment. "We're outgunned, outnumbered. This is a fight we can't possibly win." Reyes was silent for a moment before answering. No one said anything about winning. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable fire in his eyes. He wasn't concerned with victory in the traditional sense. To Reyes, this fight was not about defeating the Zerkith. It was about showing them that humanity was more than they could ever understand. The Zerkith had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they would learn just how deep that underestimation went. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Zerkith command ship, Admiral Velen, commander of the invading fleet, watched the unfolding conflict with growing irritation. His species had crushed countless civilizations before, and yet this human world was proving to be something entirely different. The resistance, though small in comparison to their armada, was unyielding. What disturbed him most was not the sheer determination of the humans, but the fact that they seemed to have no clear strategy. They weren't acting like a species on the brink of annihilation. They were acting like a species that was prepared to fight forever, no matter the cost. They should be begging for mercy by now, Velen muttered to his subordinate, his mandibles clicking in frustration. Why are they still resisting? Their tactics are unorthodox, my lord, the officer replied, consulting the data streams. They're not engaging in conventional warfare. Their ships move unpredictably, almost as if they're trying to wear us down. They're striking our supply lines, using the debris fields of destroyed ships as cover. Annoying, Velen hissed, his 3 hearts beating rapidly with growing frustration. We should have crushed them already. As the Zerkith deliberated, a new development occurred. In an unexpected turn of events, a small group of human ships, considered expendable by the larger commanders, launched a daring attack on the Zerkith flagship. It was a suicide mission, but one that carried a message. The human fleet, already suffering significant losses, had no intention of simply fading into the background. These ships were loaded with explosive charges, specifically designed to breach the Zerkith's defensive shields. The attack, though ultimately unsuccessful, sent a clear signal. Humanity was not intimidated, and they would fight to the very end. The Zerkith flagship sustained damage, its shields cracked, and Velen's rage boiled over. Send the full force, Velen ordered. Destroy them. We will not be embarrassed by these creatures any longer. But even as the Zerkith fleet prepared for retaliation, the humans were not backing down. Instead, they were adapting, learning from each engagement. The sheer will to survive, to prove their worth, drove humanity's fighters to new heights. And every time they struck, they reminded the invaders of a crucial truth. Humanity would never stop asking that question. Is that all? And as long as humanity continued to ask that question, the Zerkith were forced to confront the terrifying reality that they might not be able to silence it. The war had entered a new phase. The Zerkith, once confident that Earth would be theirs within days, were now locked in a battle of attrition. Every day, more ships joined the fray, each one representing the stubborn, unyielding spirit of humanity. Earth's military was outgunned and outnumbered, but the longer the fight went on, the more the Zerkith began to realize that their easy conquest was slipping further and further out of reach. Commander Reyes sat at the heart of the human command center, his eyes fixed on the live feed from the battlefront. The holographic displays flickered with each new engagement, showing the ongoing chaos in the void of space. Ships burned in the distance, and each blast of energy sent shockwaves rippling across the atmosphere of Earth itself. Yet, amid all the destruction, there was something else, a growing sense of defiance among humanity's forces. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were winning battles. We've breached their secondary defense grid, one of Reyes's officers reported, voice full of disbelief. The Zerkith flagship is exposed. We can hit them with everything we have. Reyes allowed himself a brief smile, though it was tempered by the knowledge that the war was far from over. Prepare the strike force, he ordered. But don't get cocky. We've only made a dent in their defenses. This fight isn't won yet. Despite his words, the truth was undeniable. The humans had begun to wear the Zerkith down. The aliens' overconfidence had led to tactical blunders that the human fleet had exploited. Their superior technology, while powerful, wasn't infallible. The Zerkith were used to dominating weaker species, but humanity had proven to be a different kind of opponent. The alien fleet was massive, but it was also cumbersome. The Zerkith ships were designed for overwhelming force, not for outmaneuvering enemies who fought with such unpredictability. The human fleet, though smaller and with fewer resources, had begun to develop hit-and-run tactics that were starting to pay off. They struck at the Zerkith's supply lines, their communication hubs, and their lesser vessels, anything that could be disrupted. Every battle had a cost, but each victory, no matter how small, weakened the alien forces. On the ground, Earth's resistance efforts were growing as well. Underground networks had formed, and civilians were rallying to the cause. Makeshift weapons, scavenged from military supplies, were being used to strike at Zerkith ground forces that had landed in select areas. Humanity wasn't just fighting in space. It was fighting everywhere. Small skirmishes broke out in cities, towns, and villages, with humans using guerrilla tactics to sabotage and delay the Zerkith invaders. The aliens had never encountered a species with the capacity for such widespread, decentralized resistance. Meanwhile, Commander Reyes's words, "Is that all?" had become the rallying cry of the human resistance. It wasn't just a question. It was a statement of intent. It was humanity saying, "We're not going down without a fight." And with each new battle, more people around the world adopted that same mindset. Governments began pooling resources in ways they never had before, realizing that this was a global struggle. There was no room for division anymore. But for all the successes, the human forces were also feeling the toll of war. The Zerkith armada was relentless, and their retaliation had grown increasingly brutal. Every time the humans thought they had gained ground, the aliens struck back with overwhelming force, erasing the progress they had made. The human fleet had suffered heavy losses, and the population on Earth was starting to feel the fear of a prolonged conflict. The question remained, could humanity really win this war, or was it all for nothing? In the heart of the Zerkith command ship, Admiral Velen was growing increasingly frustrated. The humans had managed to inflict more damage than he had ever anticipated, and it was starting to wear on him. The alien fleet was not built for long-term engagements. They were designed for swift, decisive victories, not drawn-out battles that drained their resources. But the humans were resilient, more resilient than anything Velen had encountered in his centuries of conquest. "Why are they still fighting?" Velen demanded, slamming his fist against the control panel. "They should have surrendered by now. We've destroyed their cities, their ships, and yet they persist." His subordinate, an officer who had been watching the battle unfold, spoke up. "It appears that their leadership is organized, my lord. They've adapted quickly to our tactics. Their soldiers are using unconventional methods, guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and even psychological warfare. They seem to have a deep well of resolve we cannot measure." "Then we will break them," Velen hissed. "Deploy the full force. No more playing games. We will crush their will to resist." Velen's command sent a new wave of Zerkith forces to Earth's surface. This time, they were prepared to lay waste to entire continents. But the more Velen pushed, the more he began to notice something strange. His forces were not as effective as they had been at first. Despite the immense firepower of his ships and armies, the humans seemed to recover faster than he had expected. They adapted, they learned, and they countered. The alien ships, once unchallenged, now found themselves taking hits from unpredictable angles. It was in this moment of frustration that the Zerkith learned the true nature of humanity's strength. It wasn't just their physical resilience or their technological ingenuity. It was something deeper. It was their will. Humanity fought not just for survival but for something more, a belief that they were worth saving. A belief that they could endure anything, no matter the cost. Back on Earth, Reyes watched the tides of battle shift again, this time in humanity's favor. The Zerkith were relentless, but their strategy was starting to unravel. The human forces had managed to breach the enemy's defenses once again, targeting their most vulnerable systems. The tide was turning, and humanity was beginning to taste victory. It was a long shot, but it was a shot nonetheless. "Hold the line," Reyes ordered, watching the data feeds. "Let them know. This is far from over." As the battle waged on, humanity's question remained the same, echoing louder with every victory. "Is that all?" The Zerkith, who had once believed their superiority was unquestionable, were now faced with a terrifying realization. The humans would never stop asking that question. And as long as they did, victory for the Zerkith seemed further and further out of reach. The battle for Earth was no longer just a question of military strength. It had become a war of willpower, a war of ideas. For the first time, the Zerkith began to feel the pressure not from their enemies' weapons, but from the sheer force of human determination. What had started as an overwhelming invasion, a mere checkmark on their path of galactic conquest, had now transformed into a struggle for survival. The Zerkith were used to conquering worlds quickly and efficiently, but they were unprepared for what Earth had become. A world united, fighting with everything it had. In space, the once indomitable Zerkith armada now seemed to falter. Their massive ships, symbols of their superiority, were no longer invulnerable. The human fleets had adapted their tactics, perfecting guerrilla warfare in the vast expanse of space. Every time the Zerkith ships fired their devastating energy beams, the humans would strike from a new angle, inflicting damage that sent ripples through the alien ranks. Commander Reyes stood at the head of the human fleet, his expression stern, his eyes scanning the battlefield. His ship was a small, agile vessel compared to the mammoth Zerkith dreadnoughts, but it was fast and its weapons were precise. He could see the shifts in the Zerkith formation. They were beginning to make mistakes that had become increasingly frequent as the war wore on. The Zerkith commanders were desperate to crush the human resistance quickly, but their underestimation of humanity's resilience had left them vulnerable. "Captain, report," Reyes barked, his voice sharp and commanding. "Targeting their weak points, sir," the officer responded. "We've identified several key vulnerabilities in their shielding. We can hit them hard and fast, but we'll need to commit everything to this strike." Reyes nodded. "Do it. This is the moment we've been waiting for." The human fleet, which had once struggled to hold its ground, now moved with purpose. Dozens of ships darted forward, weaving in and out of the debris-filled battlefield as they zeroed in on the Zerkith flagship. For all its size and firepower, the flagship was now on the defensive, its shields flickering under sustained human fire. The humans had learned quickly Zerkith technology, while formidable, was not invincible. And that realization gave humanity an edge. Every time the Zerkith thought they had snuffed out the human fire, it reignited, stronger than before. On the surface of Earth, the fight was equally fierce. The Zerkith had landed in key locations, trying to assert control over strategic areas. Major cities were reduced to ruins, but humanity did not retreat. Instead, they adapted. Underground bunkers became fortresses, and everyday civilians became soldiers. Humanity's ability to rapidly mobilize had caught the Zerkith off guard. In some of the most devastated areas, small bands of resistance fighters had managed to disrupt Zerkith operations for days at a time, sabotaging their supply chains, attacking their patrols, and striking with the unpredictability that had now become humanity's signature tactic. "We can't hold them much longer," one of the ground commanders, General Maria Vasquez, said as she surveyed the damage. Her face was drawn, her uniform streaked with dirt and blood, but her eyes were fierce. "But we don't need to. We just need to keep them occupied." The human strategy on Earth had shifted. With the space forces beginning to gain ground, the human resistance had focused less on holding territory and more on delaying the Zerkith, buying time for the fleet to do what it had to. Every skirmish, every battle, however small, kept the Zerkith distracted and forced them to expend more resources. In the distance, a Zerkith supply depot exploded as another human guerrilla squad succeeded in its mission. "We're buying time," General Vasquez continued. "Time for humanity to do what we do best." And just as the general had predicted, that time was running out for the Zerkith. Back in space, Commander Reyes and his fleet pressed forward with their final assault. The Zerkith flagship, once so imposing, was now on the brink of collapse. Its shields were all but gone, its weapons systems offline, and its crew scrambling to reroute power. The human ships, fueled by the relentless drive of their people, struck with a ferocity that left the Zerkith commanders scrambling. "Prepare for the final strike," Reyes ordered, his voice calm but determined. "This is it, people. Let's show them that humanity is more than they ever imagined." The humans unleashed everything they had, every remaining weapon, every last ounce of their energy. It wasn't just a battle for victory anymore. It was a declaration of defiance, a statement that the Zerkith had never truly understood. Humanity would never be defeated simply by force. The Zerkith flagship exploded in a blinding flash of light, and the shockwaves sent ripples through the surrounding fleet. It was a victory that shook the very core of the Zerkith's confidence. On Earth, the resistance forces watched as the human fleet destroyed the flagship. Cheers erupted in the shattered cities, though there was little time for celebration. The war was far from over, and the Zerkith were still a formidable enemy. But for the first time since the invasion began, the humans felt a sense of hope. A sense of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, they could win this after all. Commander Reyes, still watching the destruction unfold, felt something that had eluded him in the darkest moments of the war. Relief. The Zerkith flagship had fallen, and the tide was finally turning in their favor. But he knew that this was only one battle in a long, brutal war. And then came a voice. A new voice crackling over the comms. It was Zerkith, but it was different. There was no threat in this transmission, only cold calculation. Humanity, the voice said, we underestimated you. Reyes smirked, his lips curling into a fierce grin. Underestimate us again. He muttered to himself, and you'll regret it. With the flagship's destruction, humanity had taken a decisive step toward victory. The question that had begun with a single, defiant challenge, is that all? Was now echoing across the stars. The Zerkith had no answer for it. The destruction of the Zerkith flagship reverberated across the galaxy. It wasn't just the death of a colossal warship. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience, ingenuity, and defiance in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The Zerkith had invaded Earth expecting a swift victory, but what they had encountered instead was a species capable of adaptation, of learning from every defeat, of turning every loss into a victory in spirit. Humanity had not just survived, it had made its mark in a way no one had anticipated. In the days following the flagship's destruction, the Zerkith fleet was thrown into disarray. Though they still outnumbered the human forces by an overwhelming margin, the loss of their command ship had created a void in their leadership, and with it, a critical weakness. The Zerkith ships began to flounder, their once unified strategies fractured as their commanders fought to hold together a crumbling empire. For the first time in weeks, the human forces saw the slightest crack in the seemingly impenetrable Zerkith armor. Commander Reyes stood in the war room of the human fleet, staring at the holographic map that spread out before him. The once dominant Zerkith armada, now staggered and disorganized, was retreating. Their ships, some limping home with critical damage, were being pursued relentlessly by the human fleet, which had found new strength in the wake of their recent victories. Earth's resistance had grown, and humanity was no longer fighting for survival alone. It was fighting to reclaim its place in the stars. We've got them on the ropes, sir, Captain Alicia Turner said, her voice full of excitement but tempered by the knowledge that the battle was far from over. We've taken out most of their command centers. The remaining Zerkith forces are scattered. We can keep up the pressure and force them into a full retreat. Reyes nodded grimly. Don't get ahead of yourself, Captain. The Zerkith are a proud species, and their defeat won't be as simple as just pushing them out. We've only begun to break their will. Indeed, humanity's fight was far from over. While the Zerkith had been dealt a major blow, the war was shifting into a new phase. Earth was recovering, but the scars of the invasion ran deep. Cities lay in ruins, millions had perished, and entire ecosystems were still reeling from the war. The human race had won a significant battle, but the future was uncertain. How could they rebuild from such devastation? We need to secure Earth first, Reyes continued, his voice hardening. We can't let the Zerkith regroup. We need to hit them where it hurts most, those retreating forces. If they're allowed to recover, they'll come back stronger. Humanity's fleet surged forward, picking off retreating Zerkith ships with ruthless precision. The chase was on. The Zerkith, humiliated and driven by their wounded pride, fought back with desperation, but it was clear their resolve was weakening. They had never faced an enemy that fought this hard, this ruthlessly. The concept of losing, of not achieving total domination, was alien to them. And as their numbers dwindled, so too did their confidence. But on Earth, the cost of victory was just beginning to make itself known. In cities like New York, Tokyo, and London, where the battles had been most fierce, the rebuilding efforts were overwhelming. The The human spirit had proven itself indomitable, but now the question was whether that spirit could endure the long, painful road to recovery. People worked tirelessly, putting aside differences in the aftermath of the war. Governments, once fractured, came together, and the focus shifted from survival to rebuilding the world that had been lost. General Maria Vasquez, who had led the resistance on Earth, stood on the ruins of a once bustling metropolis, looking out at the horizon. The sky was still streaked with the scars of the conflict, plumes of smoke rising from the remnants of destroyed infrastructure, fires that still burned despite the best efforts of the emergency response teams. But beneath it all, there was hope. Humanity had survived, and in some small way it was already starting to heal. We may have won the war, but the real fight is just beginning, Vasquez muttered to herself, her voice low. It's not just about defending our planet anymore. We need to rebuild, to ensure that this never happens again. As the Zerkith retreated into the void, human leaders began to take stock of the situation. The immediate concern was the remaining Zerkith forces scattered across the galaxy. But there was also a growing realization that humanity had crossed a threshold. The war had not just been a fight for Earth, it had been a fight for the future of the human race. A future that now, more than ever, seemed filled with possibilities. On the political stage, leaders across the world began to formulate plans for the post-war era. The United Nations, once an organization struggling to maintain influence in a fractured world, now had a new role to play, guiding humanity's return to normalcy and managing its newfound unity. The war had forced the nations of Earth to put aside their old divisions in the face of a common enemy, and that cooperation had forged bonds that would not easily be broken. We're not just fighting for survival anymore, President Ellen Ramirez said in a televised address. We're fighting for our future, for the future of every man, woman, and child on this planet. We've proven to the universe that humanity cannot be conquered. But now we must prove that we can rise again. As the weeks passed, Earth's forces began to turn their attention beyond their homeworld. With the Zerkith in retreat, humanity had not only survived but had also begun to explore new frontiers. The war had brought them to the edge of their capabilities, but it had also opened up opportunities that had once seemed impossible. Humanity's resolve had been tested, and now it had a chance to strike back at the very stars. But even as Earth prepared for its next steps, there was a sobering realization in the back of every mind. The Zerkith were not the only threat in the universe. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had only just begun to realize how many powerful, unknown forces lay beyond their doorstep. The Zerkith might have been repelled, but they had not been the only ones watching. As Commander Reyes and his fleet continued their relentless pursuit of the remaining Zerkith forces, another question lingered in the air, one that humans, now emboldened, would ask as they set their sights on new horizons. What's next? And with that question came a sense of purpose, a sense of unity, because humanity now knew something it hadn't before. It was no longer content with survival. It was ready to explore the universe, to claim its place among the stars, and to face whatever challenges lay ahead with the same unyielding defiance that had brought it through the war. And so, Earth's story began again, not as a planet on the verge of extinction, but as a world determined to shape its destiny. In the aftermath of their victory, Earth was changing. The human race had faced annihilation, and yet, against all odds, they had repelled the Zerkith, an alien empire that once believed it could crush Earth in a matter of days. But now, humanity stood at the precipice of a new era. The question was no longer, can we survive? It was, what comes next? Commander Reyes sat in the war room of Earth's United Fleet, his gaze fixed on the screen in front of him. The war had cost humanity dearly, but the price was beginning to feel worth it. The Zerkith had been driven out of Earth's orbit, and the remnants of their forces were retreating deeper into the galaxy, disorganized and demoralized. Yet, while this marked a victory on the grand scale, Reyes knew that it wasn't the end. The battle had shifted from survival to rebuilding, and rebuilding wasn't just about repairing cities. It was about rethinking humanity's place in the universe. We need to move quickly, Reyes said, his voice steady but full of resolve. The Zerkith may be retreating, but they've left a mark. Other forces will take notice of our strength or our vulnerability. The war with the Zerkith may be over, Captain Turner responded, but the galaxy is a vast place. There are still plenty of unknowns out there. Reyes nodded, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. Humanity had done the impossible, but now, with the victory came responsibility. The Zerkith weren't the only powerful civilization in the galaxy, and the survival of Earth wasn't guaranteed. Every alien race, every empire would be watching closely. And with the Zerkith wounded, some might see humanity as a threat, others as a prize. It was the same lesson humans had learned during the war. Power wasn't just about force. It was about positioning, alliances, and preparedness. Let's not kid ourselves, Reyes continued. We may have driven them back, but we've also shown the galaxy that we're capable of standing up. We're not some insignificant species to be wiped out. We can hold our own. And that's going to draw attention, both good and bad. As Reyes spoke, the humans were preparing for the next stage of the conflict, securing Earth's position in the galaxy and preparing for any other powers that might take an interest in their newfound strength. The vastness of space was no longer an abstract concept. It was a tangible, immediate threat, and humanity was ready to claim its place within it. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, reconstruction efforts were in full swing. Cities like New York, Paris, and Cairo had been reduced to ruins, but humanity's tenacity was evident in the rapid pace of recovery. Every street that had been torn apart was now being rebuilt. People from all walks of life came together to clear the debris, rebuild homes, and restore their cities. The once fractured nations of Earth had united in the face of a common enemy, and now they would unite once more to rebuild. General Maria Vasquez stood at the edge of what had once been the heart of New York City. Now the area was a sea of cranes, construction crews, and rebuilding workers. Humanity had weathered the storm, and now it was about to rise stronger than before. This is our world, she whispered to herself, and we're not going to let it go. Not now. Not ever. Vasquez had become a symbol of human resilience. A leader who had stood strong through the darkest days of the invasion and had helped steer Earth through the storm. Now, her focus was not just on the rebuilding, but on preparing the planet for whatever came next. The war had shown humanity's ability to fight for survival, but the true challenge lay in creating a future that could sustain that fight. Earth's leaders had convened, and after much deliberation, they had agreed on a bold new initiative, one that would set humanity on a course for the stars. They would form the United Earth Command, UEC, a unified military and diplomatic body tasked with ensuring that Earth would never again be caught off guard by a threat like the Zerkith. The UEC would focus not only on planetary defense but also on establishing relationships with other civilizations, both to forge alliances and to deter potential aggressors. But the biggest decision Earth's leaders made was to begin construction of the Ascendant Fleet, a massive, cutting-edge fleet of warships designed for deep space exploration and defense. These ships would be the foundation of humanity's efforts to explore the galaxy, secure its place among the stars, and prepare for whatever new challenges might arise. Commander Reyes, President Ellen Ramirez said, her voice calm but full of purpose as she spoke to the gathered military leaders and scientists in the briefing room. We've proven that humanity can stand against any foe. But now we must ensure that we can thrive, that we can explore the stars and establish humanity as a force to be reckoned with. Our survival was only the beginning. The future is ours to shape. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling in. For decades, humanity had looked up at the stars with wonder and curiosity, but never with the certainty that they would have a place in them. Now, the idea of humanity not only surviving but becoming a dominant force in the galaxy seemed within reach. Are we ready for what comes next? Reyes asked, turning to the team of engineers and scientists who had been working tirelessly on the Ascendant Fleet. We've got the technology, one of the lead engineers replied. We've reverse-engineered much of the Zerkith tech we captured, and our own advancements in propulsion and energy systems are making rapid progress. We'll be ready to launch the first ships of the Ascendant Fleet in a matter of months. But we'll need resources, and we'll need time to train a new generation of explorers, soldiers, and diplomats who can make humanity's presence known in the galaxy. We'll get it, Ramirez said, determination in her voice. "We'll get everything we need." As Earth's people prepared for the next chapter of their history, the first steps toward galactic expansion were being taken. The construction of the Ascendant Fleet began in earnest, with every nation contributing resources to ensure the success of the mission. Earth's resolve had only strengthened, and now it had a singular focus: to establish its place in the cosmos, to explore, to expand, and to ensure that humanity would never again face the threat of annihilation without the means to fight back. But even as humanity reached for the stars, there were those who watched from afar, those who had seen what the humans were capable of, and those who sought to take advantage of their newfound power. The galaxy was a vast, complex web of factions, alliances, and rivalries, and the true test of humanity's place in it was just beginning. In the heart of the UEC, Commander Reyes looked out over the launch bay, where the first Ascendant ships were being prepared for departure. His mind raced with questions of what lay ahead. The Zerkith had been only the first of many challenges, but humanity had proven something fundamental. They had the strength to face any enemy and the courage to forge their own path. "Let's see what the stars have for us," Reyes muttered, a new fire in his eyes. "We've earned our place." And as humanity's ships rose from the surface of Earth, bound for the unknown, the universe began to learn what humanity had known all along: that the human spirit, unbroken and unbowed, would not simply survive, it would thrive. The ships of the Ascendant Fleet glided through the void, their sleek, newly built forms cutting a path across the dark expanse of space. For humanity, this was more than a mission, it was a statement, an announcement to the galaxy that they had not only survived their trial by fire but had emerged stronger, more unified, and with an unyielding resolve to explore the stars. Commander Reyes stood at the helm of the flagship, the Horizon, his eyes fixed on the swirling nebula ahead. It had been weeks since the fleet had launched from Earth, and the distance between them and their homeworld was growing with every passing day. The fleet's mission was simple yet monumental: to chart the stars, to establish communication with other civilizations, and, above all, to secure humanity's future. As Reyes gazed out into the endless sea of stars, the weight of the responsibility settled on him once again. Earth's survival had been a triumph, but the future of humanity rested on what they did next. They were no longer just a species clinging to survival. They were explorers, ambassadors, and protectors of their home. The war with the Zerkith had shown them the value of unity, of adaptability, and most importantly, of strength in the face of overwhelming odds. But as they ventured into the galaxy, new challenges awaited. Challenges that could be far more dangerous than any they had yet encountered. "Commander, we're entering uncharted space," Lieutenant Mira Hartman said, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "The scanners are picking up strange energy readings from a nearby system." Reyes snapped back to attention. "What kind of energy?" "Unknown, sir. It's not like anything we've encountered before. It's strong, about as powerful as a Zerkith Dreadnought's core reactor. But the signature is completely different." "Anything on visual?" "Negative. It's too far to get a clear image, but we're closing in." Reyes glanced at the holomap, which displayed the position of the fleet as it moved closer to the source of the mysterious energy readings. They had ventured deep into space, beyond the reaches of known territories, and the discovery of a new energy signature meant one thing: they were stepping into the unknown. "Proceed with caution," Reyes ordered. "This could be a trap, or it could be something entirely new. Either way, we need to be ready for anything." The fleet slowed as they approached the system, their sensors scanning the region for any signs of danger. It wasn't long before they arrived at the source of the readings: a small, barren planet orbiting a dying star. There was no sign of life, but the energy emanating from the planet was undeniable. It pulsed in a rhythm, as if it was alive, calling out to them. "We're getting a signal, sir," Hartman said, her eyes wide with disbelief. It's not Zerkith, it's not human. It's something else. The signal is encrypted, but I'm decoding it. It's an invitation." "An invitation?" Reyes repeated, raising an eyebrow. "From whom?" The signal was faint but clear, the words beginning to form in the communications channel. Reyes listened intently as the voice came through, calm but undeniably powerful. Humanity, you have proven your resilience. You have earned your place among the stars. We offer you the opportunity to join us, to understand the true nature of the universe. But be warned, our alliance will not be without its cost. The message was unsettling, not in its tone, but in its implication. Whoever had sent it clearly knew of humanity's recent victory, knew of their strength, and now they were offering something. An opportunity to join forces or perhaps something more. Who are they? Reyes murmured, his mind racing. He wasn't sure whether to be intrigued or wary. But one thing was clear. Humanity was being watched, and now they were being invited into something far greater than they could have imagined. Should we respond? Hartman asked. Reyes hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision. This wasn't just about exploring a new planet or encountering another alien species. This was about entering a new chapter in humanity's existence, one that could open doors to incredible possibilities or lead them into peril. Yes, he said, his voice firm. We'll respond, but we'll do it on our terms. Prepare a message. Let them know we accept the invitation, but we will not be controlled. Humanity is no one's pawn. As the communication channel opened and the fleet waited for a response, Reyes stood by the viewport, his thoughts focused on Earth, on everything they had fought for, and on what was at stake. The Zerkith were gone for now, but this was different. This was a new frontier, one that could reshape everything humanity had ever known. We don't know who or what they are, Reyes said to his senior staff, but we've been given a chance. And humanity doesn't back down from a chance. The moment was tense, the silence hanging thick in the air as the fleet awaited the response. Then, the voice returned, stronger this time, as if the invitation itself was pressing against them. We have watched you. We have seen your strength, your determination, and your capacity to surprise. You have earned our respect, humanity. But be aware, this is only the beginning. The galaxy is vast, and there are powers in it that you cannot yet comprehend. Choose wisely. Reyes took a deep breath, the words settling in his mind. This is it, he said quietly. We've made our choice. Let's see what awaits us. The fleet began its approach toward the planet. It was no longer just a mission of exploration. It was a mission that would define humanity's future in the galaxy. As the ships made their descent, the mysteries of the universe began to unfold before them. The stars, once distant and unreachable, now beckoned humanity to step forward, to claim its place among them. And as Commander Reyes gazed out at the dark expanse of space, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. They had crossed the threshold. The universe had been watching them, waiting for them to prove themselves, and now humanity stood at the doorway to something greater. With one final glance at the stars, Reyes spoke the words that would mark the beginning of a new chapter for humankind. Let's show the galaxy who we are. The horizon was no longer just a distant line on the edge of Earth's sky. It was the future, and humanity had stepped into it with courage, resolve, and the unshakable belief that their place in the stars was not only earned, it was inevitable. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stellar HFY content. Ring that bell to stay updated, and we'll see you next time.